Yeah, the focus in Australian politics, though, today turned to that reshuffle and also another former Prime Minister, one of those on the committee of the miserable old ghost. Paul Keating has piped up again. Yes, he's piped up from his electric recliner to tell the government what is wrong in reference to China. I find this funny. The Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, is clearly making headway in terms of trade relations with Beijing. Almost every week we're hearing more. But Keating can't help himself as he attempts to remind us, I guess, what an expert Sinophile he is and what great contacts he has. It's pathetic and sad. Pathetic and sad. Joining me to discuss all of this and a little bit more is our now Tuesday regular, New South Wales Liberal Senator Hollie Hughes. You didn't know you've become a regular, but this is the third time you've been on. So that'll do me. You're a regular.
Okay, all right. I'll just do what I'm told, Chris.
Yeah, Excellent. Chinese burn, you see? Very good. And look, thank you so much. Look, I've got to tell people the truth here. You are on a long, well-earned holiday. You haven't had one for quite some time. It's been a tumultuous 3 years, and you're willing to talk to me today. Thank you so much on behalf of our listeners here at TNT.
It's the first holiday without children or a dog for about 17 plus years. So,
Aren't you lucky?
Oh, it's just heaven.
Yeah, I bet.
Just
and then
heaven.
I come along. Anyway,
that's right.
I'm so impressed. The Liberal Party reshuffle, I just said that these are painful days for your Conservative Party, but step by step, small step even, this is how you rebuild, don't you?
Look, after a substantial period in government and going into opposition, this is quite natural that you start to see the party move. With the newer members that have been there. I'm sitting in the shadow ministry and wasn't a part of the ministry when we were in government. And there's a number of us that have made that transition. And so you will see the party start to recenter and rejig where the newer members are sitting. And I think there is sort of a more conservative bent than we probably have seen over the last couple of years, which I personally think is a good thing.
I agree. You've got James Patterson, who has done an outstanding job both in government and opposition, keeping an eye on national security. I think that's an outstanding decision. But the headline decision is Jacinta Price.
Yeah, look, I don't think we should undersell James Patterson. I mean, even as recently as a few weeks ago from opposition, he had a significant policy win when it came to TikTok and having it banned on government devices. This wasn't something that was being pushed by the now government and certainly not being pushed at the state government level, whereas James has led that debate and conversation. I have mentioned to him quietly as the mother of a 16-year-old girl, if he could get it off their phones as well, I'd be very grateful, but government phones is a very good start. So yes. he has made significant impact. And I think also today you've seen Karen Little be appointed to the outer ministry with child protection. And Karen has just recently been responsible for identifying a family who've been forced to live on a slab outside Alice Springs for the past couple of years, having had to move closer to Alice Springs for health and medical purposes.
A slab of concrete.
They've been living on a slab of concrete, and they're a remarkable family in that the kids still go to school every day, as Karen's been out there, and her and I actually discussed this the other day. The beds were always perfectly made. It was, even though they were living on a slab, they did so with amount of pride. Yet the Northern Territory government hasn't been able to secure housing for them. So Karen's very connected on the ground and will do a really good job with those families. And of course, Jacinta is very well known and very outspoken when it comes to Indigenous affairs. And as someone from the Territory, she obviously has a deep understanding of them personally in the way her and her family have been impacted.
Unlike the Teals in the Parliament, who make decisions regularly on what should happen to Indigenous Australians, but they've never been in the thick of it, Hollie, have they?
Well, there's not a huge Indigenous population in Double Bay, as you would know. So it's not really their backyard. I don't think there's a big Indigenous population in Kooyong or Goldstein either. I'm not sure Brighton is overflowing with Indigenous missions. So But as is so often the case with the Teals, it's, do as I say, not as I do.
Very true.
And they sanctimoniously tell us from on high how we can best live like them.
Yeah. Away from the name calling and hideous personal attacks connected to this voice debate, there is a central technical point in question about the voice. Should this voice panel have a direct link to the executive of government? I say no, because that is outrageously racist. Indigenous leader Noel Pearson says it's absolutely necessary. What do you say?
Well, I think this is where it becomes very problematic, because executive government, by its broad definition, includes things like the RBA. It includes every sort of public servant working in a department, as well as ministers of the day. It's not just defined as per the government itself and the ministers of the day. It's much more broad than that. And that's where there'll be problems with regards to High Court challenges. So this is the very, very problematic part. I think that's the reason we're saying Mr Albanese not wanting to release the Solicitor General's his advice in full, because it most likely will highlight the very high likelihood that things will end up in the High Court. Now, government, by its very, very nature, I mean, it's huge, as as everyone can understand. It's a behemoth, and getting things done through the government can take significant amounts of time.
Really?
If the voice is, yes, surprising. If the voice is enshrined in the Constitution to executive government, it will put almost a permanent handbrake on when it comes to any sort of government policy trying to be rolled out. And if you think about the pandemic and how quickly we needed to get legislation through to enact things like JobSeeker and JobKeeper, that wouldn't be able to happen anymore if the voice decided that it hadn't been sufficiently consulted. So
we wait long enough for you galoots in the Senate to decide on legislation that has already been passed by the lower house. We've got to wait further for the panel.
Well, I mean, this will be the thing that happens, and everything will have to go through there. And then if the voice decide that their advice hasn't been listened to, or their opinion hasn't been included in the way that it would have liked it, everything could end up in the High Court. So we're not getting clarity around this at all. And as you mentioned, whenever anyone asks a question about it or raises a concern about any legal implications that this might have, they're termed a racist or a bigot or a wrecker, and I think it's indicative of the fact when you've got nothing left in your argument except insults, where you've got nothing in your argument.
Spot on.
I think, unfortunately, for these people, that's their whole thing that it's kind to vote yes. The vibe of it's great. This is going to make us all feel warm and fuzzy inside. Is both intellectually bereft and naive, and is going to potentially cause very, very long-term problems for us as a government. It's effectively, dividing the country in two. It's fundamentally changing how we're going to be governed. And if we think it's going to stop at the voice, we know that they want treaty. There's some of these groups. And what does that mean? How do you have a treaty in your own country? How do we, what are the reparations that are all of a sudden going to be looked at? What percentage of GDP is going to have to hand it over to the voice? These are all significant considerations. And, I would certainly urge any Australian to have a really good look and think about this, because if you don't understand it, if you don't think that we live in a country that needs to basically have its democratic system torn apart, well, then there's no other reason. There's no other option other than vote no.
Yeah. If you don't know about it, vote no, which is what Alan has been saying, and he said yesterday on the program. And the whole thing about not being able to compromise at this point is ridiculous. Like, where was the compromise on this between Indigenous groups and the government? No, there's got to be compromise within Parliament now.
No, but even the Uluru Statement of the Heart, there was, everyone keeps going on that, it was all these Indigenous voices pushing it together. It was, in its very nature, a selective conference. People were invited to that. It wasn't just open to whomever wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't every Aboriginal voice across the country that was included in that. It was quite heavily selective in the people that agreed with themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
It was by very definition, an echo chamber.
Yeah, I want to talk about this Barney between the Foreign Minister and a former Prime Minister, plus the NDIS. Right after a very quick break, I'm with Liberal New South Wales Senator Hollie Hughes on TNT Radio.
You should hear what Charlie Robinson is talking about.
What do you make of this insanity with Trump? This feels really weird to me. The whole thing, after all is said and done, does he come out of this looking like a martyr?
I think so. I mean, the worst part for them, whoever them are, is not only is this case ridiculous, but on top of that, don't forget, it's the Southern District in New York that's sitting on all the Epstein stuff. They haven't indicted anyone. They haven't even questioned Bill Clinton. We're at a place where it is just persecution, political persecution, and it looks bad to the rest of the world as much as it does us, while our military-industrial complex and the Uniparty continue to instigate, I believe, wars all over the world. And to me, it's a bigger picture, which is, Donald Trump right now, not only are they making him look better, but there are millions and millions of people who have been wronged by our justice system. People put in jail for white-collar crimes or small crimes. People, especially in family court all over, that are right now maybe never even liked Trump, never voted for him, never voted at all, but are going to vote against the justice system and the corruption. So, I mean, they're really backfiring here.
Charlie Robinson on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
This is a message for the parents of young children in the United States. I am Dr. Tess Laurie from the World Council for Health. Please consider the danger of vaccinating your children and babies with the COVID-19 injections. They are not the same as traditional vaccines and are causing significant harm to children around the world. Your children have their whole lives ahead of them. They are not endangered by COVID at all. Please hear us when we say, for your children, it is much safer to wait. Thank you.
Where the story goes, we follow. Chris Smith on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
By the way, you heard the voice of Dr. Tess Laurie there from the UK. I'll be speaking with Tess in a day or two on the program. But right now, I've got New South Wales Liberal Senator Hollie Hughes with me right now. I've been chuckling over this ongoing Barney between Foreign Minister Penny Wong and former Labor PM Paul Keating. Hollie, the sparring continues. Penny spoke at the National Press Club yesterday and rightly pointed to the progress being made over trade deals between Australia and China. We all want a thawing of relations between the two sides without having to lose too much face or too much sovereignty. But even when the ledger looks fairly impressive, in Penny's favour, Keating can't help himself but bash up his old party. Has he got Tourette syndrome? Every time the word China hits the news, he's compelled to share his outdated wisdom somewhere, somehow. Get out of our faces.
Yeah, it's like relevance deprivation syndrome on steroids. I think when it comes to Mr. Keating, there's a way to bow out of public life graciously, and I'm not quite sure Mr. Keating's established that. Look, I mean, you're not going to hear me say this very often, but I do think Penny's doing quite a good job when it comes to this. She understands with regards to defence and particularly in light of the AUKUS deal, where our natural allies lie with regards to the US and the UK. And our threat, it really is from China. We know the cyber attacks, the trade wars that have basically been inflicted, have already escalated tensions with China. And to somehow think that we need to be on an appeasement road with them is just absolute insanity and just shows how out of touch Mr. Keating now is.
He is. He so is. Now, I know you take a great deal of interest in the health and efficiency of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, otherwise known as the NDIS. How many times are we going to listen to the NDIS Minister, Bill Shorten, complain about the rorts and inefficiencies, which he's done since they've been in power, before he just rolls up his sleeves, gets his hands dirty and fixes the damn thing?
Look, the entire time that the coalition was in government, remember Bill Shorten was one of the key architects of the NDIS at the time.
Yeah.
This was his and Julia Gillard's baby. And in effect, the NDIS has been like trying to build a plane when it's already in the sky because it was rolled out so quickly. And, Julia Gillard signed off with the state governments basically absolving them of all responsibility when it came to anything with disability. And I can share with you, my son with autism was excluded from a community health speech pathology series because the NDIS should have looked after him about 10 years ago. And this was at a time when NDIS services didn't exist in the country town we lived in. But the states just basically said, if you've got a disability, we don't want anything to do with you. And that's come across now in health and education policy, which is why we've got so many kids going onto the NDIS who really shouldn't probably be on there and probably shouldn't be staying on the length of time that they are. But it's because they're not getting the supports that they require at school, particularly in those early years. The education department's just washed its hands of them at a state level. But I've been on the Joint Standing Committee of the NDIS for 3.5 years now. I don't even know how many inquiries we've done and reports we've handed down. And time after time, we have drawn attention to the fact that there are providers, more than, that people like to focus on the participants and their plans. The problem is the providers, very much in my view. And a lot of them haven't moved from the old block funding days, so they haven't modernised their systems. So the most expensive part is what we call supported independent living. So it's when people live in group homes, and need very intense supports.
Yeah.
But these are the most expensive parts, and they're not being managed well. I know one of my son's providers, and I actually talked to Bill about this. I saw him at a lunch not long ago and said, we got to get rid of the NDIS price guide. My son does these sessions and gets charged the NDIS rate, which is about $60 to $70 more per hour than if he just went in as a normal non-NDIS client. Yeah, and there is no reason for this because we self-manage, which means I get the invoice and I pay it myself. So there's no administrative cost to them. But because of this price guide, they're not doing anything wrong. They're adhering to the price guide. But by its very nature, it's making NDIS clients the most lucrative for them to see because they can charge the most. And it's having a look at things like this that will bring costs down. I did notice that Bill Shorten today talked about longer plans and making sure that people aren't having to come back every year. Well, he probably needs to go and talk to a few more people because certainly since COVID, a lot of participants have moved to 2 and 3 year plans, which has been a great improvement. But again, that reduces the costs and the bureaucratic bungling that's continually coming out of the agency itself. But everything we tried to propose when we were in government to make it better, the Labor Party opposed in the Senate. Yeah. We have tried a completely different tact with this government and said, look, we know that there's things to be done. You stood in the way of us trying to affect any change whatsoever. We will not be that obstructionist when it comes to the NDIS. We have said we will work constructively to improve this incredibly important world first program. But, Bill needs to get on with the show and start having a look at it. And a lot of the work's been done. We've done 3.5 years of inquiries. They've been before my time and we're still continuing on them. There's plenty of recommendations he can start to put into place. Instead, here we go again with another review.
Yeah, exactly. Just get on with it. Roll up your sleeves. Have a look at the people who've done the work for you. It's all there in front of you. Get on with it. Thank you so much for your time.
The unions provide a lot of disability support workers. So, we might
he doesn't want to upset them,
where his bread's truly buttered.
Yeah, right. Well, you go back to the bar and grab that margarita and enjoy the next few.
We will cheers to you. Have a lovely afternoon.
Good on you, Holly. Thank you very much. All the best. Senator Hollie Hughes from New South Wales, from the Liberal Party. Interesting. Her take on NDIS is, well, it needs to be heard because she's been closely monitoring what's going on, both as a parent of a child connected to it and also as the senator overseeing it. So she sees it from both sides and she knows what needs to be done to make it more efficient, but the government seems to dilly-dally over it. I guess this upsets their providers who are union connected and maybe the politics is what gets in the way. But Bill Shorten, stop holding press conference at the National Press Club like you did today to talk about how bad aspects of the NDIS is. Just get in and make a difference. Change it. Audit the providers if you have to. But change it and save our taxpayers lots and lots of money, please.